Loretta wrote guns, girls, and greed. We did good, we did bad.
Still here, and we're still seen as the oppressors, and they still want us out.
War is toxic, but it's intoxicating.
Welcome. Obviously, it's been a great opportunity to get to know you just by reading your book. I really feel like you're one of like a combination of like 10 different guys that I've served with. And it's funny because, again, coming from the Marine Corps as a reservist and then being active duty, switching over to Army Special Operations with the 75th Ranger Regiment, and I went through Ranger School. Was not an RI, no fake, no funk faker when it comes to that. But I did have quite a few laughs at that because most people, they just don't know the difference between an RI Ranger instructor. They think is more of a Ranger than an actual Ranger is, a bat boy. So anyways, I had a good time listening to that part. So just want to, if you just want to kind of introduce yourself, mention, just why you decided this was the time to write the book that you wrote and kind of what you want to do with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Morgan Loretta. I wrote Guns, Girls, and Greed. I was a Blackwater mercenary in Iraq. Sounds cooler if you take the intonation down in your voice, I think. But no, I'm like one of those guys that never had a plan, right? I was the kid in high school that grew up like, low class and, broke. So small town USA, all the recruiters were like licking their lips trying to get to me because I didn't have any direction. I didn't have anything to do in Cottonwood, Arizona. Right? You either go work construction or you go work at the Safeway, and that's about it in Cottonwood. So I knew that I wanted to get out of Cottonwood. I talked to some recruiters, talked to the Army, talked to the Marine Corps. My grandfather was like, dude, I was in World War II. Go to the Air Force. They have the best food. And I was like, good enough for me. Why the hell not? So I joined the Air National Guard because I was too good to be the guy that like joined active duty. And I was like, well, they'll train me to be a cop. And then, if I want to become a cop, that'd kind of be neat. Even though I smoked tons of weed in high school, it probably wasn't going to happen anyway. But I joined the Air National Guard. And then September 11th happened. They activated us for 2 straight years, sent us all over the place. I went to Oman for my first deployment, young, single, why not? Second deployment was to Jordan, and that was during the build up to the war in Iraq. And then from Jordan, we went to Kuwait, and Kuwait, we went in during the ground offensive in like March 2003. And I was like, war, yeah. And then you get there and you're like, okay, I'm in mop gear. I'm hot. It's disgusting. So I joined the Air Force, or the Air National Guard Security Forces. September 11th happened, and I got woken up by my mom, I think. I was like, watch the TV, and I was like, oh, man.
How long were you in at that point when September 11th happened?
Dude, I got it. I got in December 99, so it was a little under 2 years,
Okay.
So I was like, man, life just changed, but I don't know how. My pager went off. I was in college at the time. My sweet pager went off, and it was from my base, and they were like, get down here. So they activated us for a week. Nobody knew what the hell was going on. And then they activated us for a year. And then they activated us for a second year. And I was like, dude, this sucks. Like, I'm sitting here staring at airplanes, and it just is not nearly as cool as I thought it was going to be. So I deployed over to Jordan when we were getting ready for the buildup to Iraq. And we had the Rangers, we had special operations. That's where the Predator drones were flying out of into Iraq looking for scuds. And then, I don't know, Iraq caught wind that we were in Jordan and they got all pissed off. So Jordan kicked us out and Kuwait was like, we'll take you guys. So I went to Kuwait, Air Force style, dude. We were like living in a 5-star hotel, which was spectacular, watching the news as the ground offensive started. And then finally, like after the big shock and awe, they were like, we're ready to start our first air base. So I flew into Talil Air Base. We started the first air base. I thought, man, this is going to be awesome. I'm in Iraq. We're getting our war on, right? You've been training for this. And then the whole war just went north and nothing ever happened except, me trying to stop people from driving on an active runway. That was it. Like that was my entire job.
Yeah.
So I did that, and I was still activated for a bit after And my buddy was like, dude, I'm going to go work for Blackwater. Now you got to remember, like March 2004 was when Blackwater had the guys hanged off the bridge in Fallujah.
Right.
And he's like, let's go work for Blackwater. And I was like, first off, dude, I'm Air Force Security Forces. I'm not that cool. The second off, like, those people are dying. What are you talking about? And he's like, I'll put in a good word for you. He's a former or Marine Force Recon guy, had a 5th Force in Okinawa. So he gets over there, and they're like, who do you guys know that would want to come work for Blackwater? And he's like, my buddy Morgan will do it. Dude, I got a call like the next day. Like, this is how the recruiting worked. There was no resume. There was no like, oh, show what you, right? Like, and nobody had combat experience back then, unless you were in Afghanistan or you were in the Iraq ground offensive. There was no combat experience. So they just grabbed people, and I went over there, I did my train up, and they were like, all right, let's go to Baghdad. So that was June 04. By like August 04, I'm chilling in Baghdad at the U.S. Embassy, drinking beers behind the pool, thinking, what the hell am I doing, man? 23 years old, making $550 a day. And honestly, like Blackwater, like I grew up in Blackwater. I grew up in Iraq. So after Blackwater, you know, I can get into it. I became an intel officer, went back to Iraq. But really, at the end of the day, Blackwater was such a weird environment that I had to write a book about it. Right. And it's not that like I had the coolest experience, and it's not that like I was the coolest guy ever, but I can actually put, you know, pen to paper and write. I don't know where it came from. But I wanted to really get the story out of like, what did Blackwater do? We did good. We did bad. I can't deal with politicians talking about how horrible Blackwater is. I can't deal with Eric Prince talking about how great we were and we never did anything wrong. Like at the end of the day, it was a very gray area that we operated in as a civilian in a combat zone, working for the State Department without rules of engagement, no UCMJ. Like, dude, it was just absolutely insane. And the characters that I met, and you're talking everybody from like SEAL Team 6 all the way down to like turds like me, Air Force Security Forces. Like these were probably the smartest, most like just people that knew how to get crap done, and like highly competitive. And I would start telling people stories, and they'd say, man, you got to write a book. You got to write a book. And one day I just got pissed off and was like, dude, I'm just going to start writing the stories, Tucker Max style, right? Like one story after the other. And then I sent it off to a dude that he writes for Hollywood. And he's like, dude, you can write. Like, you can straight up write. And I was like, oh, I'm glad we're friends. I would like friend of a friend. But he's like, no, like legitimately, like you need to actually put this in a book format and get this thing published. So that's what I did. So there was no like, oh, it's been 20 years. It's time for us to reconcile. There was no like grand plan. Like I said, I've never had one. Probably never will. I just wanted to get the story out. And it's just a cool story, man. Like, at the end of the day, I want to read stories about the guys that were on the ground. I want to read the story about like the E3 Marine Corps guy going through Fallujah or Ramadi. I don't want to hear the general talk about how great they were and everything. And then we lose wars. Like, give me the dudes on the ground being best friends with dudes that they've never met, that bond, that like insanity, the stupid conversations that you have. And that's what I did. I just put it all in the book, and you know, I hope people like it.
Yeah. I think that's where what you just touched on, I think, is what your book resonates with me, because just honestly, as soon as I started reading it, Tucker Max obviously came right to my forefront of my mind, but also Generation Kill. So it's like you just said, instead of hearing from generals, irony, I literally, the last person I had in my house interviewing was a 2-star Marine general. But what's fascinating is that he actually fired first sergeants and higher ups who, when he would go to visit a base, they would have everything all clean and they would have repainted. He's like, if I smell fresh paint, it's not going to be good. And of course, they wouldn't listen most of the time, and he would show up. And he says this in the podcast, but he would show up, and here's everybody in formation. He would not go to them. he would leave and go outside and go around to the other side of the building, and he would find a couple of Lance Corporals or PFCs, and he would just come up and be like, "Hey guys, what's up?" And of course they're terrified. He's like, "No." He's like, "Seriously, what all did they make you do to get ready for me to come here?" And they're like, they can't lie to him. So they told him. And then he would promptly go fire whoever it was that did that. And I think that type of a mentality, right? It's instead of this whole whitewashed, pretty version of, I'm sure a ton of Blackwater dudes did amazing things constantly. But like you say, and you actually explain and kind of fill in the gaps with the conversations where you're the driver and the driver's running people off the road, but also there's this top gunner and he's shooting and everybody's like, "Well, did you shoot the person? Did you shoot?" And then also there's, Iraqis that are constantly running around going, "Oh, you killed my whole family. You killed my wife. I need money. I need money." And it's this gray area that you're talking about that I think that your book really opens up and lets people at least get a glimpse into that gray area and how confusing it is for the guys on the ground that are in the middle of it. And they are told, our left lateral limit and our right limit is somewhere in here. And that's where you need to kind of stay. Well, what happens when it kind of needs to go to the left a little or to the right, and that's what I think you really kind of break down for everybody. Your story, if you don't mind, I know we're already jumping into the book real quick. One thing that immediately jumped out to me is you said that your grandpa said the food's better in the Air Force, but after listening to you wanted to go where there was more trigger time. So there's a part of you that wanted to be a Marine. There's a part of you that wanted to be in Army Special Operations, to be, one of the cool guys. But you jumped at Blackwater, obviously the phone call. But I don't know, I guess because I was dirt poor too, raised out in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma. I just knew that I wanted to be around rough dudes, and I didn't know if I would make it, but I knew I had to try. So when you were signing up to go in the Air Force, what made you not just stop and go, actually, I'm going to at least talk to the Marine Corps recruiters and maybe think about going that route? Like now that I've read your book, if that makes sense.
Yeah, dude, I talked to the Marine Corps guys. I talked to the Army guys, and at the end of the day, 1999, when I was being recruited, we weren't going to war, right? The prior war.
Marine Corps boot camp in January of 2000.
Yeah,
I joined in September 99. I know. There was no war. There was never going to be a war.
Exactly. We didn't see any wars. There was Somalia, but that was like a very small subset. Before that, Panama, that was tiny. Before that, I mean, you have to go all the way back to Vietnam to be in real war situations before 9/11 happened. And I just looked at the military as a stepping stone. And that's how the military kind of looked at new recruits, right? You come in, you do your 4 to 6 years, we invest money in you, you give us some time, you leave. There was none of this career trajectory stuff that you talked about. And dude, I didn't know anything about Navy SEALs. I couldn't even told you what a Ranger was.
Right. I had no idea what a Ranger was either. Yeah.
Yeah. At the end of the day, this was going to be something that I did for 4 to 6 years, and I jumped out and got my real job, figured out what I was going to do with my life. So once I got in, I realized there's you just realize how many weak-minded people are around you. Right. I wrestled in high school. You're around all these tough guys. I went to basic training. There's this guy over there, and I'm still friends with him to this day, but he's crying his eyes out. And I was like, dude, what's the problem? And he's like, I miss my dogs. And I was like, are you joking? We're getting fed really good here. They tell us what to do. It's not that bad. So, when I started hanging out with those former Force Recon guys and they were talking about the cool shit that they did, I was like, yeah, I want to do cool shit. And I talk about it in the book, but we're sitting there just wasted out of our brains. And my buddy Tony from the book is like, do you want to be the guy that makes millions of dollars and you look at your grandkids and you say, oh yeah, I traded GE before at the peak? Or do you want to be the guy that's got really cool stories? And you know what? Like at the end of the day, that's what you have. That's your legacy, is your stories. And whether you pass them down to one generation, they get to two, whether you write a book, like nobody is going to sit there and remember these people that made billions of dollars and be like, oh my gosh, I really envy him. No, you envy his money. And what those billionaires do, as a total side note, is they collect guys like me that have cool stories. They want to be around it, right? Like every billionaire on the planet is hanging out with the guy that shot Osama bin Laden. Like that's just how it goes. So, I finally got to the point when I got into Blackwater, I was like, I want to be the best at stuff. I want to go and do like the really cool. And then when I went into the Army, I went in as an intel guy. I wanted to fly helicopters. Helicopters is like a 7.5-year contract, which I didn't know at the time. And I was like, dude, I know I'm not going to like the Army. So I joined as an intel guy, thought, hey, I'll go to work for the CIA after this. And once I got into the Army, we supported special forces guys all the time, which is what I say when they want to act like they were cool. Oh, I was on the SEAL Team 6. Well, no, you were the guy that gave them toilet paper. Like, I get it. That was me, dude. I was the intel guy taking their intel. And those guys were like, look, dude, go to selection. We'll pull you in. And I was like, you know what? I've already got my cool stories. Like, I don't have anything to prove at this point. Yeah, I'm the Air Force guy. Blackwater guys are like, you were Air Force before. You weren't real Blackwater. Or, oh, you say you were a mercenary and we were over there working for the State Department. You weren't real Blackwater. And I'm like, dude, I was probably there longer. I was probably on cooler teams and we were there for the money. Don't sit there and try to pretend like we were there just to go help the people of Iraq. We weren't, man. So I'm just one of the few people that'll call it like it is. I was there for the cash. I was there for the adventure. And then after I got fired the second time, I was like, well, now it's time to go start a real life, man.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, man, just thinking over the whole story, once you get to the end of the book, as I said before we even started, I literally had to go back and read your book a second time. And there's so many more things I actually got out of it the second time that I had not really picked up on. You do this thing where you're 30 seconds before that, 60 seconds, 90 seconds before that. What was his name? The gunner, the huge dude that was, he wasn't in the hate truck, but he was the gunner. You tell that story here and then you move back in time for that story. The first time I heard it, I didn't pick up all the details of that. So what's great about your book is that literally I definitely learned more and picked up more things that I actually didn't pick up the very first time that I listened to it. When you very first start out, what's interesting to me is because, again, yeah, I joined the Marine Corps and literally I said, what's the hardest job that I can get in the Marine Corps and I can still go to college? And that's where the recruiter got me, is like, okay, heavy weapons specialist, infantry, Marine Corps. And I'm like, yes, let's do that. Because I just wanted the hardest training. I knew that what I had been through in football training and track and wrestling, I came from doing hard stuff on an individual basis, but really I wanted to be tested against the guys that are the best. And I think that's what you were just talking about. Once you leave from, or I guess you didn't really necessarily leave the Air National Guard, but you meet a guy who's Force Recon and he joined the Air National Guard. He was in there with you. Is that right?
Yeah, he was there for the college money and then September 11th happened. Yeah, he was there for the same reason I was.
Right. But once you're around that person, then it's this ideal that everybody has of a SEAL Team 6 dude or a Delta Force operator or an Army Ranger or Force Recon or a PJ. All of these things are, they put on their pants both legs at a time. They, brush their teeth at the same time that they eat and poop, and they're out of the door in 3 seconds. It's like the whole idea you have as to what that person's like is not really what they're like. Now, they are different, though, because they've had so many experiences to push them through comfort zones and through the hard times that what they are, once you get around those guys, that's the part that you never want to be around. Kind of like you were talking about. Once you experience being around those dudes, though, you do want to be around other guys like that, not funk fakers. You want to be around the legitimate guys, because when those hard times come, they're not going to. I forget the old guy who ended up like crumpling during training, and he ended up not going up the stairs and going to get the. Can you tell that real quick, because that's a great example of somebody who got into this job and is clearly not qualified and can literally cost, who knows how many people their life if they were in an operational status.
Yeah, dude, I realized pretty quick, and I'm the Air Force guy, so I shut my mouth, but I realized pretty quick that even some of the best trained guys ever physically are just specimens. But when it comes to being able to act and react when something happens, they don't have it. They don't have like the mental part of it. So I'll tell you a different story that I didn't put in the book. But just before I got there, there was a guy, they went out in the red zone and they ended up, I think, taking fire, or they were taking fire close, and everybody ran over to the vehicle, and this guy's a driver, and he locked all the doors. And they're pounding on the Suburban, the armored Suburban, the only place where they have protection. And this guy's like frozen holding the freaking steering wheel, and they can't get in. And this guy, he had all the training. He was there before I was, so he was in the community, and he just absolutely froze. And he was the guy that ended up giving us all of our gear. So if your M4, your M9, all the other stuff, like he became the admin weenie, which is always what happens. Like you take these guys, they either produce or they don't. And then if they don't produce, you're not going to send them away. You're just going to make them the admin guys, the planner guys. So the two incidents, the one is the Ranger instructor, and we're at training, and they take our principal into a building, Moyock, North Carolina, Blackwater, spectacular. If you've never been out there to train, they go upstairs, and we hear gunshots. And they're like yelling, "Oh, the principal's been kidnapped." So the Ranger instructor is posted on the door. He's supposed to be the first one in. And me and another dude are posted kind of outside of it. And he was a recon Marine. And like, we just look at each other and we just start running towards fire. And this guy, I mean, you could see, we had goggles on, but you could see his eyes were big, and he just froze. He was just standing there, like looking around. We went up there, we cleared it. Of course, they have our principal. He's on his knees, and they got like their gun to his head, and like we go in, we start kind of pieing off the guy. We clear the door, we pie off the guy, so we're out of each other's field of fire. And then he raises the gun at me, shoots me in the hand. Both of us light him up. If you've never been hit with like a sim round, it hurts, man. So I was more than happy to put like 4 or 5 in that guy. And then we came down, and it was like, well, who was the first person in the door? And it was me, and I call him Hog Slayer in the book because he'd do anything. Like, he just would grossest chicks on the planet. He's the butcher of Baghdad. But like, me and him went, and they're like, well, who was posted at the door? And the guy like sits there quiet. Like he knew he screwed up, but he wasn't willing to take it. And I mean, Navy SEALs, I've seen them do it. And I think some of it just comes with age, right? You get like, you realize that you're mortal as you get older. Whereas me and the other guy that ran in, we're 22, 23, 24 years old. Same thing in Baghdad. Like, our QRF was extremely young people because we wanted to go out there. We wanted to go 8, 9, 10 times in the red zone every day. Whereas the older people, your retired guys, would just sit around and play poker. Dude, I'm 43 years old now. I would play poker and make $550 a day. But at 23, I didn't want to play poker, man. Like, I wanted my adventure.
Right. And I wrote that down. That's one of my notes that I had for later is there are a lot of guys, and I think you nail it right there. There's a lot of guys who have been over there long enough that they've gotten their fill of driving all over Iraq and maybe had some close calls and all that stuff. And so they kind of worked that out of their system. But now there's either they're divorced, so they lost half of their money. Now they have to stay there for a few more years in order to get back to where they think they could be good to be able to do what they want when they get back to America. Or there's the guys who they live that way, man. They get off rotation, they go off, and they spend all of their money on leave. In 35 days, they blow all the money for a 4-5 month rotation, which is what we ended up being scheduled to do, even though they all ended up running into 6-9 months, especially I was there for 2020. So all of COVID year I was in Iraq at the Baghdad embassy. But I think that's something it's amazing to me when you sit there and try to realize where everybody's at and what you're talking about, how the young guys are the ones who still want to go out, but also the new guys. So when I got there, I was 39, not fresh out of, right. And again, I've done four combat tours. I've got to see a whole lot of cool stuff. I've seen history, been a part of history. And so it was like, I don't need to prove anything, but at the same time, there's that I want to drive fast. I want to be inches, not feet away from the bumper of the next vehicle. And I want to drive in the motorcade, and I want to be that guy. And I got to do that in law enforcement. Not really, but I mean, I got to drive fast, but there was still that little bit of itch, I think, that I wanted to go back and do that. But then once I had done that, for a little while, then I'm like, yeah, I'm still collecting 400. At that point, it was $412 a day is what we were making at Triple Canopy over there. And, and then like you say, the old guys are always out there playing poker. And some of those guys, they will literally blow a month's salary on a poker game. And so a lot of guys are like, hey, don't go play poker with the Department of State agents because they play for like house deeds. They're insane with what they do over there. And again, those are people that are divorced. They don't have anything over at home. They literally just live there. And I met a lot of those guys too, where I was curious, did you ever meet anybody who didn't own a house, didn't own a car, literally was just a contractor, and they didn't own anything in the world?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I first got there was so many young guys. You mentioned Generation Kill. A lot of those guys that were in the book and in the miniseries were guys that I worked with, right? So they just got out of the Marine Corps. They didn't have houses. They didn't have spouses. They didn't have anything, right? So some of them would go on and kind of leave that behind. And some of them are probably still chasing it to this day, right? Because I say war is toxic, but it's intoxicating. Like you were 39 years old and talking about, oh, I wanted to go experience it again. And then after a while, you're like, oh yeah, it's still the same. Like it's not that crazy. But you really get to a point where that becomes your normal life. And a lot of people, myself included, after my first 6 months, dude, I blew through every penny that I had. Now, the one thing I did do is pay the IRS. If you're looking at getting into contracting, pay the IRS. I promise you thank me later. And they just like it is their life. It is their career. And I looked at it the same way I looked at the Air Force, right? This is something that I'm going to do for, a year. I figured I would do 18 months. The first year is like, because I started in June, so I was going to have to pay the tax man. But if you are over there 330 out of 365 days for a year, then you get your first $85,000 tax free. So then I'm only being taxed on $100,000, and I'm going to pay, I think 20% in taxes, as opposed to getting up to that next tax bracket and have to paying up that. So I had already assumed I was going to do 18 months. But I had to kind of start making a conscious decision after that first contract. Yeah, I probably better put some of this money in a bank account and maybe start an IRA, which I didn't even know what that was. I just, there's a dude there that was like, you need to put it in IRAs. And I was like, cool, this guy is really smart. He's Ivy League educated. But that's like the paradigm that you get there. You get guys that are Ivy League educated with guys like me that are from small town USA that don't have a brain. You have the best of the best trained. And then you just come together and figure out how to do a mission. And you do it way more efficient than the military ever did. Because that's our biggest, right? We get out of the military and we're like, oh, we sat around a lot. 50% of the time, I think I read this somewhere. 50% of the time in the military, you think, man, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this because you're not doing much. And then the other 50% of the time you think, man, I don't get paid enough to do this. And it really is that. But with Blackwater, it was like you have a mission. You're going to go on that mission. When you're done, put your crap away, go hit the gym, go hit the pool, go get drunk, and then, rinse and repeat. So it was, and I could tell 1,000 stories that are or not in the book, but every day was just like an adventure until it finally got to a point that I was comfortable there. Like it felt like home. And when I went home and I had a house and a dog, like I didn't feel comfortable.
Yeah. And that's something that you mention in the book. And I think, and I have that later on in the notes too, where you're getting to the point where you say, I think it was like you said to your grandma or something, but you're like, I used to be a nice boy or something, because you have these internal thoughts that you should be nice to this person you're driving by, but instead you just say F you to them and point your rifle at them. Right. And I think it's the most logical thing that a healthy, rational person can think when you are surrounded by and constantly dealing with people who don't care about their country. They don't care about anything at all except for what they can get for themselves right now. And that's it. Like if you go over there and help an Iraqi, he's not, while you're there trying to help him, right? Say you're trying to teach him something. The whole time he's sitting there and listening to you, he's trying to think of how he can get that watch off of you, or hand you a keychain so he can get your sunglasses, as another example, right? Like legitimately, they don't care what you could teach them to fish. They don't want to learn to fish. They need whatever you have on you right now, and they need to keep doing that every day from now on. And you see that whenever you especially go to the palace, he's their president or prime minister, whatever he is. I went there and I literally go in and everything's marble and all this big, grand, building. And there's still just a hole in the floor, and it's still urine all over the floors, all around it. You have to step over a puddle of that. And there's literally gold on everything in the bathroom, but it's still just open sewer on the floor that you're walking through. And they don't even notice, because that really is how their culture is set. And that guy is taking the billions of dollars that we're sending to them, and they're literally just handing it out to a few dozen people, and that's it. It never goes past those few dozen people. And I just watch as we get, pallets and truckloads of money. I didn't go physically touch it, but I was there at late nights taking people to meet the ambassador at his residence, where he's telling them, yes, here's, whatever, how many ever millions or hundreds of millions that we're going to give to the. And you're just sitting there going, I'm making $412 today, and you're giving this guy literally hundreds of millions of dollars. And all of it is literally just going to go to his cousins and uncles and buddies. And that's it. And then we're still going to drive out of the gate, and we're still going to see the dogs covered in mange. We're still going to see everybody just standing around looking for any opportunity to blow us up, overtake the embassy. I was there for the embassy attacks. Like all of those things, you just get jaded, but it's not jaded. It's just, you're finally aware. You're not a boot anymore. You're aware of what actually is going on, and you deal with that on a daily basis. You realize that you have to be that way, because otherwise you're going to get rolled over. You're not going to survive very long, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Dude, there's no such thing as patriotism in Iraq, right? Like when you talk to an American, they say, I'm an American. And then from there, it's like, okay, well, now it's like, I'm either a Republican or a Democrat. And then from there, it's like, but it usually starts where everybody has a common ground of, I'm an American first. When you look at, and you can go all the way back in history, I won't kill you with it, but the Sunnis and the Shias have hated each other forever. And Iraq is the meeting point of the Sunnis and the Shias. The first thing they're going to tell you is, I'm a Sunni, I'm a Shia, I'm a Syrian, I'm a Kurd. And they don't care about the country. And I remember, I didn't put this one in the book, but I remember sitting there in the Kurds. The Kurds actually care about their land. And these guys are like, grabbing cigarettes, they take the pack off, they put a cigarette in, they throw all their garbage on the ground, and I was like, they're just littering. Like that. But you could tell it was so nonchalant to them. Like there's no laws against it. They didn't care if it looks like shit, right, that going through the gutter. Like they don't care about that stuff. They care about, how am I going to survive today and hopefully make enough money or swindle enough to be able to keep surviving. So you get jaded. And dude, as a military member, I tried to tell my soldiers when I was in the Army, first 3 months, you're going to want to help. Second 3 months, you're going to say, oh my God, are we actually doing anything right? Third 3 months, you're going to be like, I hate these people. Last 3 months on a year-long deployment, you're literally going to be like, I'm counting my days to get out of here. And my soldiers didn't believe me. None of them had deployed. I get over there and like after we deployed, they were like, dude, you were like spot on. And you just get to a point where you realize that you care more about their country because you have to, because the Army told you to, than they do. And if they don't care, you stop caring. And that's where you start getting like that PTSD setting in and that like frustration and that anger. And, you know, you're in a high risk situation, even if you're not being bombed. It's high stress. You're working long hours. And then you come home and it's like people are worried about the expiration date on their milk. And people are worried about, like, people are complaining that they put a new stop sign in. And you're like, none of this matters. Like, why do you guys, it's this very weird place where you feel more comfortable in your anger and frustration in Iraq than you do when you're at home. The story you were talking about, it was a Kia, and it was the white Kia. And I've never seen a clean car in the Kia or in Baghdad. And it's like, dude, they must have just got done washing this thing. And we're going around a roundabout, and this guy doesn't yield to us. And the driver smashes into the Kia to the point that I could see into the back of the trunk. Like, it was that smashed up. And as we're driving past, I looked at the guy, and dude, I felt so bad for him. Like, literally every fiber of my being felt bad about this guy because he absolutely loved this car, or else he wouldn't have washed it. And all I could do was point my rifle in his face and say, get the way next time. Because, and I think that that's something people don't understand until they've done it. How fast your mind moves when you're making a decision like that, right? That was maybe 2 seconds. When I flick the selector switch from safe to fire and I'm getting ready to light up this red car, the amount of information that my mind is processing is like a supercomputer, to where everything slows down and I'm just firing rounds and I'm rattling them off. And then all of a sudden you're like jolted back to life and everything's going in regular time. Like, I've never experienced that before, and I'll never experience it again unless I'm in like some crazy car wreck or something.
Slow motion time, which have you ever read, you've read On Killing or On Combat? Okay. I think On Combat is the one where he breaks down the slow motion time. And I experienced the same thing. Ironically, I did that in combat on one mission. And then as a police officer going into a hostage situation where a guy was going to shoot his girlfriend. And it was an ambush. He was just waiting for me to come in the door. And I did while you're describing that in the book, I was literally like, I can picture how slow everything moved and how big the bullets in this revolver looked to my eyes. And I was moving, like you're saying, your brain has the ability to turn off sounds, to hear specific sounds, but turn off other sounds. And it's wild. And again, that's something that unless you've experienced it, again, it seems like it's almost like somebody talking about an out-of-body experience. I don't know what that means. I guess I could string myself up over my bed and pretend, but it's not the same thing until you actually have experienced slow motion time or auditory exclusion or any of the things that somebody goes through in that high stress situation. But yeah, your humanity, it's not that again, I don't think personally, from my experience anyways, and all the veterans that I've talked to and contractors I've worked with and talked about this, like, I don't think that makes, I think it's just the natural thing. That doesn't mean that you're a bad person inside or that you're changing. I think that's what we worry about. When I was a police officer, I was starting to be more jaded and all those things because I just saw people do things so many times, and then I saw the result, right? You're doing something stupid. I literally just had to go clean up somebody off the street who was doing this. And it's not so much you endangering yourself just because you're dumb. It's you put your kid, you let your kid stand up in the back seat of your car with no strap on them, and then you're reversing down a one-way street with a blind corner. What are you doing? And this is the grandmother with the mother in the front seat. And you're like, how did any of you survive to this date? There's no way that you guys have survived this long doing this. But there they are, and it's those types of moments where you also have to just realize, you're still a good person on the inside and you can get back to that. But if you stay there, and to your point too, with the contractors who just live there because they get used to that, dealing with reality instead of all these, Netflix is going up $1 more per month and people are literally spending their time, protesting online and trying to get people to get them to take it back down, or they want this company to do this. And so they're organizing a rally, and you're sitting there going like, people are dying around us all over the place. But here in America, we're so insulated that our biggest problem is the price of milk, or, the price of gas at the tank. And those things are real and they do annoy us. But if you've been over there, it's so hard to relate to a civilian who's complaining about those things to you. It makes you want to snap at them. But I think once you've once enough time happens, this is just my experience so far. I think I kind of calm back down and I'm able to have normal conversation. Yes, the price of milk. Yeah, yep, absolutely. It's so terrible. But at the same time, you in the back of your mind, much like in this book, you're really thinking all these other things and you're just not saying them out loud. And that's what I loved about your book is you're saying the quiet parts out loud. You're saying the part that nobody's actually saying out loud. You're just putting that into the book and sharing the reality of what's going through your mind while you're going through this.
Well, I mean, as in my current work, my manager's like, how come nothing ever phases you? Like everybody's freaking out. Like, I mean, oh my gosh, this one thing just happened and everybody's freaking out trying to get on calls. And I just like figure it out and I handle it. And my manager's like, where did that come from? And I was like, a lot of time overseas. Like having been over there as like a contractor, and dude, I mean, I was over there with military people and they would have freak out moments over people not wearing their PT belt while bicycling, right? Like there's some people that is their entire life is nitpicking stuff. But I think the people that actually see combat in its real form can look at it and say, this is what I need to concentrate on. This is what's important. And the rest of this stuff is like fodder. I'll get to it when I get to it. But the rest of it's just kind of fodder for right now. Let me focus on that closest target before I start worrying about the price of milk. So that's, I mean, you're the person I would want to read the book, right? Military, you spend time overseas, like the conversations that you have, because combat is like 99% pure, unadulterated boredom. You are sitting there with your thumb in your butt trying to figure out what to do. And then it's punctuated by like pure adrenaline. There's not a whole lot of middle ground there. So what do you do with that? Well, you start having these conversations like, and one of them in the book is like, would you rather have with the biggest, fattest woman on the planet or a ladyboy from the Philippines? And then we're debating, transgenderism before transgenderism became a real thing, but we're trying to figure out if we're going to have that person. Dude, the stuff that comes out of these people's mouths, it was like so shocking. And I'm sure they said the same thing about me when I wrote this book. A couple of the guys reached out to me and were like, A, you nailed it on the book. And B, like, this is Morgan. Like Morgan became an Army officer. Morgan works in corporate America. Like you couldn't shut your mouth. You were like the guy that would come in there and be like, no, this is good. Why are we doing it that way? And they're like, how did you ever adapt? And I was like, I don't know. I guess I just go for it.
Yeah. Leading your mutinies, I think was, for some reason, I got like this feeling of, I don't know. I think I literally got endorphins when you successfully led mutinies, because there's so many times where I wish that I could have led a mutiny. And contracting is just not like that anymore. They want yes men over there, and they tried to get rid of, and very successfully got rid of, a lot of the old guard. So the guys that there was probably about maybe 10 or so guys that I knew of I didn't necessarily know all of them, but I knew that they had been there since the beginning. Like these dudes were Blackwater. I don't know about class '01, but they were, they're not funk fakers. They were legitimately there this entire time. And they don't need money. Like they've been contracting for 20 years, and some of them were smart, and they were guys who saved their money, invested their money. One guy, I'm trying to remember, he was telling us one time, he had a whole business in the Philippines or in Thailand or something. He has a whole mining operation going over there, and he goes home on leave and works the whole time he's on leave, mining gems, and he makes more money doing that than he does contracting. And he's been contracting for 20 years. And so you're just like, why are you here? And this dude was just super stressed out every second of every moment that you're sitting in the truck waiting for this meeting to happen. They're just like, is everybody good? Everybody good? I don't know. Man, what the frick has happened? Hey, and they're just so stressed out. And you're like sitting in the back as a new guy going, I don't know if I can even sit in this truck. Like, this is so nerve-wracking with this guy just bouncing all over the walls and stressing about every little penny ante thing that they could possibly stress about, much like the sergeant major who ends up being dressed down in front of all these people. I love the way you explain it, because that probably is the first time that guy's heard that he's a terrible leader, probably in the last 15 years of his career. And it's funny because in the military, that's what happens. Failing forward, failing upward is what happens a lot of times, because a lot of guys who are the good leaders get out, they do their time, they leave, they take those life lessons, then they take it and go start a business. They go, into corporate America and do that, as opposed to just staying where it's comfortable, where it's safe.
Yeah, no, I mean, I make a joke that if you're like a sergeant major or a first sergeant, like your entire job, yeah, or a major, your entire job is like walking around trying to tell people like, oh, well, your PT belt isn't on right, or you're like that's their life. Their entire life is like, I got to the apex of being an enlisted guy, and I'm going to ask you to present a book that you're supposed to have in your pocket. Like, come on, man. Like, you're killing me. So, there were a lot of those guys. There were a lot of those guys that, they came out of the military. They weren't necessarily special operations guys, and they were great in the head shed. They were spectacular planners, but they were not leaders of men, especially men that did not like, I'm over there willingly. I can leave at any given point. And I'm not going to sit here and have some guy make my life hell and make me work a lot of extra hours that I don't need to do, because that's the way he was trained to do it in the Army. Dude, if you love the Army that much, you should have stayed in it. And I'm an Air Force guy, right? Like, you can say what you want about the Air Force, but at the end of the day, it's pretty efficient. They get planes up in the air every day. Like, there's not a whole lot of just screwing off. I mean, there's a ton of screwing off, but like, they actually have a day-to-day mission. So when these guys would come in and be like, well, you need to be here 2 hours before we get into the car, and we got to make sure you have water. And it's like, dude, I'm a big boy. If I don't have water, that's my fault. If you don't have water, that's also not my fault. So piss on yourself. So there was a couple of mutinies that I led, but that's just because I had a loud mouth and was like, dude, I'm too young and stubborn to be dealing with this stuff.
And I think that's something that like not having a wife and kids and a house and everything dependent on you, you can be that way. You can really just jump out there and be like, hey man, this is, whereas a lot of the other guys are hesitant because they know they need this job. And what was great, I think, especially back then for you guys, was you could be fired and just moved around to another spot. It happened several times where somebody gets fired and so they move him over. Now he's handing out gear. Whereas nowadays they're like, no, fired. We keep track of everybody. He's not going to be on a DOS or a DOD contract over here with me. And that kind of stuff did happen while I was there, but it's rare. But again, that's the fear, right? Meanwhile, all that drama is happening. right? I think this is the next layer. You're talking about the Americans worrying about the penny ante stuff. Then you're also talking about just the drama within the teams. I experienced this where, I think that the time hack, I was told the time hack is this, and I think I need to be at the trucks at this time. Well, you guys are rolling out at that time. Oh, crap. Big boy rules figured out, right? Well, there's those dudes who want to worry about PT belts who just want to sit there and do an AAR and sit there and just keep talking about this. And then for the next month, you're going to keep hearing that in every team meeting about how we need to make sure that okay, bro, like we get it. But it's like there's that. And then you're sitting there and a rocket comes in and takes some dude out in the shower, or a rocket comes in and hits some dude in the chow hall, or a mortar. And you hear these stories, and these aren't made up. Like, this actually happened to somebody. They're just sitting there and a mortar landed on them and they died. And you're just like, well, I mean, that's just how it is. You go to the chow hall, you're still going to go eat, you're still going to go to the gym. And while I was there multiple times, rockets land, rockets and mortars hit both the little mini chow hall thing that we had, just kind of little snacks that you could go buy and get. When the regular chow hall wasn't in service, it hit the gym. And multiple times while you're running around the compound, which I was a runner, so I would constantly be trying to run around the perimeter. Dudes were having to dodge mortar fire and rockets at night. And you're like, I mean, that's just the way it is. You just got to roll with it. And if you are not comfortable with that, bro, like, you need to get out of here, and we need to get somebody in here who can deal with that. And the guys who, can't, they would literally, almost like, I hate to compare it to prison, but they would check in. They would go and be like, hey, I need to get out of here. I can't do this anymore. And the head shed's trying to keep them. And we're all like, do not keep him. We can't have that guy on the team. And like you're talking about, locked up behind the wheel with a vehicle locked and we can't get in. Like, that's real. Guys can go through combat, have done hard stuff, and then something happens and that it switches, and now they can't handle that stuff. And those people, they need to seek psychiatric help, and they need to work through those things, not just continue to be pushed around to, okay, well, we'll just do head shed stuff with you instead. No, like, that dude needs to get out of here so he can get help, and we can get somebody over here that can actually handle this. So anyways, that's just my little takeoff on that one. The rockets coming in. How often did you guys deal with that? Did you guys literally ever deal with rockets hitting the gym or anything while you're at the Baghdad embassy and they had to shut down the gym and all that?
Oh, dude. Yeah. We did. I mean, it was almost like having a rooster crow in the morning. So the sun would pop up, and this was like August, September of 2004. The sun pops up, and then they would take their truck on the other side of the river of the embassy. They would shoot mortars, rockets, whatever they had, and then they would drive off. But like, that was your wake up call. That was like, oh, we're trying to wake up. And the first time it happened, dude, it's scary. And it's scary for a couple of reasons. One is that you can't control it, right? Like that, I think that's a lot of reasons why people have problems with combat, is because if you're out there and you're like, you got your weapon and you can flick it off and you can start firing, you kind of control that. You feel like you're in control. When a rocket and a mortar hits, you're not. It's just luck of the draw at that point. So the first time it hit, it was like morning. It was right after breakfast. And the first rocket hits, and we all sit up in bed. We're in this big tent, like this circus tent. So we sit up in bed. And then the second one hits. It gets pretty close. So we all start looking around. But, dude, I'm not going to be the guy that's running out, because I'm not going to be the, right? Like, dude, I'm already the Air Force guy. I don't want to be the push. Dude, the third one hits, and it, like, when a rocket hits close, you could feel it in your guts. Like, it almost compresses your guts, right? Dude, it was that close. And somebody took off for the door, and we all kind of looked around for half a second, was like, yeah. And then we all ran after him, right? And got into the bunker because it was too close. But it was like this measuring contest where we didn't want to be the guy that's sitting there, like, running out the door scared. So, but dude, we got rocketed all the time. The team house got hit. Or the team tent got hit. Which is a funny story, because the guy I'm standing next to, like, the team tent gets hit with a rocket, and you can see the dust up in the air. And the guy looks over at me and goes, "There goes our internet." And I was like, "Really? Like, that's the first thing you think of? Like, there's people in there. They're dead, man." It turns out that the rocket was a dud. They were putting in like the wrong fuses. I don't actually know how the whole thing works, but they were putting in the wrong fuses. It was a dud. Nobody ended up dying, but it went like right through the tent, right through the floor. And the first thing that guy thought was, "Well, now I can't get on MySpace." Like, how awesome is that? And then, dude, we got rocketed. Like, there was the guy that got hit with a rocket while he was taking a shower. He was a State Department guy. He ended up dying. It was just luck of the draw. And I make a joke about it because that's kind of how I cope with everything, is that this guy had his pink loofah and he's scrubbing his beanbag, and next thing you know, like, he's dead. And I only make that joke because everything when I deployed was pink. I had pink towels. I had pink loofahs, pink like toothbrushes, because nobody steals pink stuff, man. And dude, if it's not nailed down, somebody's going to steal your towel. And I had so many, like my first few deployments, I had like 4 or 5 brown towels stolen. I was like, screw it, dude, I'm getting the pink stuff. So, I mean, that's the joke, but like literally you're just sitting there washing your armpits and a rocket hits. And we had a girl in Iraq when I was there with the Army. She got hit by a rocket, dude. It was just like a 1 in a million shot. And you just kind of come to the realization. And for me, I don't internalize it, right? Like, I think a lot of people say they're shooting rockets at Morgan or they're shooting rockets at Seth. They aren't. They don't know who I am. I don't know who they are. They're shooting rockets trying to scare you or kill you. And it doesn't matter if it's Morgan or if it's Seth or if it's, Beyonce. They don't really give a crap. But a lot of people that I've talked to later that have problems with PTSD and stuff, they really internalize it. They think that rocket was being shot at me. Or I had a guy call me once and was like, "Dude, I drove my Humvee over a grenade today." And I was like, "Did it blow up?" And he's like, No, it was just a grenade." And I was like, "Dude, I walk by bullets all the time and they don't shoot me either. Like, who gives a like?" But a lot of people, like, that's scary for them. Whereas for me, it's like, dude, if nothing bad happened, like, don't internalize it. This isn't, nobody gives a, here's the one thing I have learned in life. Nobody gives a crap about you except you and like your close family. So like, dude, you can't internalize it and be like, that person meant to cut me off. Or you could be like, yeah, that person's just a bad driver.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so you're talking about that. It reminded me of, and you mentioned, some of the Department of State people, being idealistic and not experienced, I guess is the best way to put it, right? Because it's when they very first get over there, anybody typically is coming from that background, especially, is going to come over there with all these ideals, and they've been sold a whole lot of lies, unfortunately, by people in universities that will tell them that, all we need to do to fix this country, and all these people will just come together, and they will, we're all going to get together, and everybody's going to see us as saviors, not as oppressors. And one fascinating thing is, after the embassy attacks, so they hit us the day before, so December 31st of 2019, and it carried on for like almost 2 weeks. But when they actually burned our gates to the ground and came over the wall, the Department of State people and DOD and kind of like the service workers, right, especially the chow hall workers and those types of people, we are running around the compound and getting these people to safe locations and protecting them. And we're literally the line of defense for these people that are going to come over the wall and kill us all, as we, that's all we can know that they're trying to do. We don't know that they're testing the perimeter. We don't know if they're actually just going to try to, do as much harm as they could, but not end up getting themselves killed. You don't know any of that when it's happening. What I thought was fascinating is I had this really strange situation where I'm in a building. I was in one of the SDAs, where the CIA people were housed at, and the day of, kind of toward the evening especially, they dropped a couple of Marine security guards, and these kids are brand new, straight out of training. And they literally, some dude runs by and hands us a box of miscellaneous grenades. They're just like, well, what are we doing? It's me, one person, and I got 2 Marines on the ground floor of this. Everybody else has moved up to where you're supposed to be on the top floor, where it's actually barricaded, and that's where you're supposed to get on the helicopters. That's why there's a helicopter pad. But anyways, the whole point is, like, these young dudes are in the fight, right? This is Benghazi for them. That's what they know this is about to be. And they just hand us a box of miscellaneous grenades, and we're trying to read to see if this one's actually going to be lethal, or this is just going to be a flashbang, or this is going to be, they had all kinds of weird ones, the non-lethal ones. And it was just this surreal moment where I'm the old guy now looking at these kids, and I'm laughing, and I'm like, guys, here's the thing. We're going to pull the pins on all of these, and we're going to throw it at them no matter what. It doesn't matter if it's lethal or it's not lethal, or it's just going to scare them. We're still going to be throwing it at them. We're going to work our way up to the top of the stairwell. We're going to make it through this. And I'm trying to convince them. Now, let's fast forward 2 weeks. They have psychiatrists brought in, and they are constantly reminding everybody, putting up notes. If you need to talk to this counselor about this, going through the embassy attacks. And of course, as you might imagine, just like you guys not wanting to run out of that tent, even I would imagine for the guys who were terrified, they weren't going to go see the psychiatrist. And they did a very good job of like you would just go to a building you can go to anyways, and you can go there to get food. So they were smart the way they did it, but still, it was the Department of State people primarily, and then the Department of Defense and the other workers that are constantly going and seeking treatment for that, not us, right? Not the people who are actually standing there getting ready for standing at the wall, that are up in the towers that are getting smoked out. It's not those guys. To me, it was, again, one of those surreal moments where you're working with these people and you just don't understand how to get it through their head that you're in a combat zone. It's not an active theater, but we're still here and we're still seen as the oppressors, and they still want us out. And so you're just, I don't know, for me, it was just this really, you in this book just made me kind of remember a whole lot of scenes there from my life and experiences in the same stomping grounds you were at. I was just there, a couple decades after you.
Well, dude, all those State Department guys were all there to help with the cause until one of them got killed. And then you could see that, like, the amount of missions plummeted after a couple of them got whacked, man. And I think you need those do-gooders, right? I got out of the Army. I went to Tufts University. It literally a place that creates diplomats. And these guys would come in and they'd say, oh, you know what South Africa needs is they need indoor plumbing, and I was like, maybe they just need some security so that the warlord doesn't like hack their limbs off. Like, let's start there. But they don't think that way, right? They think in creature comforts the way that you and I likely don't. But as soon as something happens, man, like there's a flip. And I'll tell you when I noticed it, we were doing this little exercise in grad school where one person was like the head of the Department of Defense and Department of State, Department of Energy, all this other stuff. And the scenario is essentially like China has attacked a U.S. ship and they're trying to take over Taiwan, something along those lines. And I'm like the only military dude, but I don't want to be the DOD guy. So I'm like Department of Energy guy. And all these guys, like the more that it escalated, all of them started being like, well, now we got to fire on the mainland. Well, now we got to do this. Now, like, and they were escalating it way faster than I ever would, because I know what happens when you escalate it. Like, the poop hits the fan, people actually die. And it was very telling for me that they were all the ones that were like, okay, so we're going to send ICBMs from, the U.S. and we're going to hit 3 strategic positions over in China. And I was like, whoa, bro, like, let's take a breath here. So it really, as much as they are idealistic, it also explains why all these people that are anti-war will go and vote for war. It explains why the Democrats are now all pro-war in the Ukraine, whereas like in the 60s and 70s, they were putting flowers in the barrels of U.S. service members. Like at the end of the day, everybody sees war as a viable option as long as they've never experienced it. But the second they experience it, they're like, now I got to go see a shrink. Now I don't really want to go outside in the red zone nearly as much. So yeah,